Hello, fellow gardeners, and welcome back to Cultivate for day two. We have another great lineup for you today, and we are really happy you've decided to join us this weekend. If you live in the area, I'm hopeful that you will get some of that rain that's been dancing around us. My name is Muriel Lanford. I'm a Bexar County Master Gardener, and I will be your host for the online workshops today. For those of you who were unable to join us yesterday, just a quick review. These classes are part of Cultivate. We hold it twice a year, and this is our 16th Cultivate. And we have several individuals online, shout out, who have attended every one of our Cultivate events since its inception in 2017. We really appreciate you guys. At this year's Cultivate, we have some great giveaways. A drawing will be held after the end of the event today for 12 $25 gift certificates from Rainbow Gardens Nursery. Every session you attend is a separate entry for these great prizes. Now, just a little about us. As Master Gardeners, we are part of the AgriLife Extension Service of Texas A&M, which is the community training and education arm of A&M University. Master Gardeners support Texas A&M AgriLife by providing research-based, unbiased, and locally relevant gardening and horticultural education. And in fact, the Bexar County Master Gardener homepage has extensive resources for you under the gardening library. You can find that located on the homepage of our website. There are hundreds of publications on multiple horticultural topics for you to access at any time. You can find this information at bearmg.org. If you have questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A button located on your screen. For most of you, it will be at the bottom of your screen. We have a team of Master Gardeners ready to answer your questions. If you have a question for the speaker, I will ask those at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time before we get to your question, you can still contact us at cultivate@bearmg.org. Let's get started on our day two topics. For our first session today, we're fortunate to have Bill Swantner with us again this year. And if you've attended previous Cultivate events, you will know why Bill is one of our busiest speakers. Bill has been the Master Gardener of the Year for Bexar County and came in second as Master Gardener of the Year for the entire state of Texas. As Master Gardeners, we actually have 14 different advanced training courses offered to us, and Bill has been through 9 of them. So I know you'll want to hear what he knows about beating back the weeds. In your landscape, Bill is your guy. Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, give me a minute here. Okay,
You're getting there, not quite there yet.
not quite there yet. Is that it?
You're there. Okay.
Can we see it? Does that
Yes,
say
if
winning
you
the war?
yes, if you could move your mouse because we're seeing your windows, mini windows at the bottom of the screen.
Do you know how to get rid of those?
I think if you just move your mouse elsewhere, I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
I
um,
could be wrong.
that's unfortunately that's what I have. Is that going to be too much of a distraction? Because I don't know how to get rid of these things.
I think we'll be okay. And if we have a tip for you, we'll have our IT guy weigh in. But
All right,
let's go ahead and get started. There
there you
you go.
go.
It's
It
good
went
now.
away. All right. Sorry about that. Good morning. As Skip Richter, the retired horticulturist in the Houston area, says, where sun hits the soil, nature plants a weed. Um, Technically, a weed is anything growing where you don't want it to grow. So if you have a magnificent blue bonnet in the middle of your rose garden, technically it is a weed. And the movement has gone from weed control to weed management. Weeds are just part of life. We may not like it, but they just are. So weed management looks at prevention, eradication, and suppression as a whole. Back in the 1960s, there was a movement to control pests. It's called Integrated Pest Management, or IPM. They came up with that because they found insects were were developing an immunity to some pesticides, and so they had to come up with a better way to deal with pests. And about 10 years later, they came up with the concept, same thing with integrated weed management, as opposed to simply spraying weeds, because the weeds have found some of them have developed to the point that they can avoid. Well, I'm sorry about that. Wait a second. All right, sorry, there's unexpected dog here. Some weeds were developing an immunity to herbicides. So they tried to figure out a better way to take care of weeds, and they adapted the integrative pest management. So here is the pyramid for integrative weed management. The first thing is prevention. How can we best prevent weeds? Then the next one up is cultural. How can we develop a culture that will minimize weeds, mechanical, and then finally chemical. And then the thing on the right says prevention up to intervention. Interventions, the chemicals, what we try to do last. Oftentimes, it's the first thing we want to do, but it's really a culture of weed control. So let's get started with prevention. Prevention, there are three primary things. It's your first line of defense. One is having clean tools. Um, I know sometimes I will occasionally mow another person's yard, but when I get through it mowing their yards, I always uh, clean the underside of my lawnmower because the weeds that we mow in one yard can easily end up in another yard or in our own yard. So one thing is clean tools, whether you want to disinfect your tools or clean the lawnmower or have a dedicated lawnmower. I'm not sure what, but our tools because it's easy to spread weeds from one place to another. The second thing is weed-free compost and soil. When I was a kid back in the 1960s, we used to buy in the yellow pages or in the one ads, we'd buy dirt just to get a load of dirt. We got about every 3 to 5 years because the years in between we're picking out rocks and weeds. We just bought, they said it was river bottom dirt. And we thought, well, that sounds good. I have no idea where they got it from, but when they brought in the soil, the dirt, we called it, they brought in the weeds and we had to pick the weeds out of there. So prevention, a great first line is to get weed-free compost and weed-free soil when you buy it in the bags or in the bulk yards. And then the one expression is your shadow is your best defense. And what that means is you are out in your garden or out in your yard often. You're looking for weeds. You're seeing what's growing that you don't really want growing. Coming up pretty soon will be a weed I'll get to in a few minutes called Poa annua, which helps our yards look absolutely beautifully green in the winter months. But it is a weed, and what happens is it dies away. It kind of chokes out our grass, and come April we have all these big brown spots. So your shadow is really your best defense because you are seeing what's growing in your yard and what you don't want growing in your yard. So from prevention, we go to cultural, and there's various aspects of culture, and the idea is to build a strong defense. A culture of preventing weeds is having good, deep, well-amended soil amended with compost. Our soil is a very heavy clay soil, and a dandelion flower can have maybe 300 seeds on it. And it only takes that one seed to get lodged in that clay soil, and somehow it gets its roots through that clay soil. And when we go to pull it, it just breaks off. But a well-amended soil allows the plants that we want to grow there to develop deep roots, and it helps the healthier the plants are that we want there, the more likely they are to fight weeds becoming established. And in San Antonio, the best way to work with our soil is to add compost. It breaks up our clay soil so that the plants we want can get deeper roots. Another strong defense is having a healthy lawn and garden. And I'll look at these in a couple more slides, but proper mowing height is one way. Optimal watering, and we'll look at those in the next slide. And also the correct fertilizing, and I'll get to that. But the plant selection, if we buy plants that grow here they will better crowd out the possibility of weeds becoming established. And then finally, mulch. So let's take a look at these one at a time. Optimal watering. There's drip, there's sprinkler, and there's watering by hand. A 30-foot drip system with 1 gallon per hour. That's what GPH means. 1 gallon per hour emitters. And there's going to be this 30 foot with one emitter every foot. And you leave it on for 45 minutes. We'll use 22 gallons of water. If you leave a sprinkler on for 45 minutes, you can easily use 200 gallons of water. And if you want to water by hand, you're going to use 22 gallons of water in 3 to 4 minutes. The thing about sprinkling, watering with a sprinkler is not only you're watering the turf grass and the plants you want, but you're also watering the weeds. Drip irrigation puts the water specifically where you want it, and so the weeds do not have access to the water that the plants will. And then hand, again, sprinkler and watering by hand, we're watering whatever happens to come across there. So if we can become more water efficient using drip irrigation, that's wonderful. I realize that for lawns, it's not going to be necessarily practical. Um, Mowing height. We kind of get a little backwards in some of our lawn mowing. Um, Bermuda grass and zoysia grass likes to be mowed low, maybe 1 to 2 inches, because what that develops is a really good, deep, healthy, thick root system, and weeds cannot get established in that root system. But St. Augustine is the exact opposite. St. Augustine, we want to grow that high, maybe 3 to 4 inches, because the taller blades will provide some shade for the stolons that are growing on top of the turf grass. And that really thick St. Augustine will not give the weeds the sunlight that it needs to start to grow. And it's as I walk through my neighborhood, I see people mowing their St. Augustine virtually at ground level. And that exposes the stolons to the direct sun, which is not healthy, but allows the weeds to grow. So people with St. Augustine, we want tall grass. And people with Zoysia and Bermuda, we want it cut low because they growing properly, they will minimize the possibility of weeds. We talked about water. Then another one is excuse me, I'm getting back and forth here, is fertilizing at the correct time of year. Right now, we're getting kind of tired of lawn work because it's 100 degrees outside. But coming January, February, people's lawns start getting a little antsy. They want to make sure they get that grass green early. And so the grass in January, February is dormant, and we want to fertilize it. And what we're actually doing is fertilizing weeds. And so if we can put off our synthetic fertilizer till around April the 15th, which is a great day to remember because it's tax days, one of the great holidays of our year. You pay your taxes, you come home and you spread fertilizer, and somehow there's a connection between the two. I'm not quite sure what it is. If you like to use organic fertilizer, then you apply it around the beginning of March. The difference between synthetic and organic fertilizer is that organic fertilizer has to be sort of eaten, chewed up by the microbes in the soil, and then what they eat, they will excrete, and that becomes fertilizer for the turf grass. With synthetics, the fertilizer goes directly into the turf grass. But if it's dormant, which is January and part of March, then what we're doing actually is we're giving fertilizer for the weeds and not the turf grass. One of the things about actually, there's two things about weed feed products. If you put the product out early enough to stop the weeds, uh, it's not feeding the turf grass, you're feeding the weeds. If you wait to put the weed feed on to fertilize the turf grass, you've missed the weeds. So we really don't suggest the weed and feed products. If you want to put out a pre-emergent, that's one thing, and it works on grassy weeds. But otherwise, fertilizing at the wrong time of year, and at this time of year, sometimes we want to put down a nitrogen fertilizer, and some of the plants are starting to get ready for winter. And the only plants that are they're appreciating the fertilizing are the weeds. So that's why the correct fertilizer at the right time of year is so critically important. All right, so then we go to mechanical. Mechanical, there are a few ways to do this. One is physically getting out there and pulling the weeds. That means that, yes, you have to. I realize some people in the past said, but I have this huge yard. There's this one flower bed that I'm making. It's about a 30 by 30, and I just go through and I just pick a section, maybe a 2 foot by 2 foot section, and I just clear all the weeds out of there. I pull them. I have a trowel that I dig down there and pull out some of the other ones. The soil has been very well composted, so it pulls out very easily. Another mechanical way to avoid the spread of weeds is to keep the weeds constantly mowed. What happens you see here in this diagram is this dandelion is going to seed, and when that goes out, then all of a sudden it just starts to spread more weeds. So you want to make sure that you keep your weeds mowed if you don't go out there and pull them, or if you're in the process of pulling them, get out there, pull those weeds on a regular basis, mow the ones that you haven't gotten to yet. A couple other ways of mechanical is people like to solarize a section. Solarizing is where you put a clear plastic cloth over an area. Sometimes people will put black plastic cloth. The problem is that black absorbs the heat. And solarizing, what we do is we pick an area of ground, maybe a 10 by 12. We water it, and then we put a piece of clear plastic. We want that sun to go through the plastic, hit that soil, and the plastic is sort of held down by rock or whatever we need to, and that's going to cook that soil. It's going to cook the weeds. It is also going to cook some of the helpful bacteria and fungi in the soil that we need, but it will rebuild when we solarize an area with clear plastic. What we're looking at doing is killing as much of the weed seeds as we possibly can. So you can pull the weeds, you can mow the weeds, you can solarize the weeds, whatever you think you need to do. But that is a mechanical way of trying to control the weeds. So far we have created a culture. Let's see, I'm gonna get there you go. So we've created a culture of weed control. The first thing is we have prevented the weeds from even happening by the way we have our tools, by the way we keep our gardens, by being present in the garden. Then we have our cultural controls, and now we have our mechanical controls. Biological control is an experimental thing that some people are trying. It's not really well accepted yet. That's more from IPM. But then we go to chemical. Chemical is really our last resort. There are a couple ways of handling chemical use. One is a pre-emergent. Pre-emergent is what it does is it's a granular product, you put it on the turf grass or in the yard, and what it does, it prevents seeds from germinating and interrupts their reproductive cycle. And so pre-emergent herbicides will stop the seeds from germinating. And it's kind of an awkward thing. We will soon in the fall months put our pre-emergent for the winter months. In the winter months, we put our pre-emergent for the spring and summer months. Once the weeds have started to grow, a pre-emergent is not going to work whatsoever. And on the pre-emergence, it's a matter of what weed you have. And here's what I tell folks when they ask me about weeds, and the same thing applies to insects. Pull the weed up, put it in a double bag it just to be super duper safe. Take it to your local nursery, um, tell them this is the weed that I have. What do you have that will kill it? How do I apply it? And when do I apply it? I personally do not recommend particular products because everybody's a little bit different. Every product's a little bit different. And some products evolve over the time. A lot of us grew up with the idea, we'll just put Roundup on it. And the joke is that Roundup doesn't have Roundup in it anymore, in part because of the lawsuits, but in part just because of product development. So Roundup today doesn't function like Roundup used to be. So I could say, well, just go buy some Roundup because it might not work. And there is some Roundup that is actually they're saying is safe for turf grass. So I hesitate to suggest products and even chemicals. Some of the chemicals that kill the weeds are multisyllabic that I couldn't even begin to pronounce. So if you have a weed that is really an issue for you, dig it up, put it in a plastic bag, double bag it would be nice so that your weed seeds don't go to the nursery. You go to an independent nursery, and many of them will have what's called Certified Nursery Professional, CNP. And you take the CNP, your weed, and you say, this is what I have. If you want to know the name of it, you can ask the name of it, but ask them, what product do you carry in the store? Well, that will take care of it. When do I apply the product? And how do I apply the product? Because more does not mean better. So anyway, so pre-emergence work primarily with grassy weeds, not so much with sedges. Post-emergence deal with kill weeds that have already sprouted. And post-emergence, the granulars will work with some of the grassy weeds. Once the weed has already started, it's kind of a challenge. Um, there are there are different kinds of weeds. Let me see. Okay, I don't have it here. There are different kinds of weeds. There are broadleaf weeds, and there are nut sedges, and then there are grassy weeds, which is why I said to dig your weed up and take it to the place and ask them. If you have a nut sedge are those things you pull and they break off and then they come right back because underneath the soil, maybe 3 or 4 inches, is a little nut that is giving that keeps shooting up sprouts. So we keep breaking it off and keep sending them up. And nut sedges will spread out and all of a sudden they're all over the place. A broadleaf weed killer will not kill a nut sedge. So if you think, well, it looks like a weed, I'll just put some a weed killer on it, certainly it'll work. That's not true. That's why you bag it, you take it and say, what will you have that will kill this? There are specific nut sedge weed killers that don't affect grassy weeds. They don't affect broadleaf weeds, which is why it's important to, I'm going to keep saying this because I want to make it clear. Take the weed to the independent nursery and say, this is what I have. All right, there are selective herbicides that will kill specific weeds without harming the desired plants. And so some of the sedge killers will do that. They will kill the sedge plants, but they will not harm broadleaf plants. Selective herbicides, they kill anything. And an old example was Roundup from years ago. Whatever it touched, it killed, whether you wanted it or not. Sometimes some weed killers come with sponges. You can wipe it on the leaves of the weed if you want to go that far to make sure that you can get the just that weed. But that's why chemical is sort of the last resort because it requires really a lot more work than simply keeping the yard relatively weed free to begin with. So the question is, well, can I use synthetic or can I use organic? Organic weed killers overwhelmingly are acid based. The ones you make at home, whatever, they're going to be made out of vinegar or something that is acidic. They will work to an extent, but they are going to be non-selective. So if you have your vinegar-based product and you go to spray it on a weed in the turf grass, it can kill the turf grass because what the organic acid base does is the acid eats away at the cuticle on the outside of the leaf and basically burns it. And so the weed will die down and it may work on some of the annual weeds, But when you get the perennial weeds, the dandelions, the thistles, they've got these long tap roots. And what you're doing is you're burning off the top, and they'll simply shoot up more weeds, much like the nut sedge. Remember, 3 or 4 inches underneath the soil is that little nut, and we keep breaking off the top, and the nut keeps sending up more weeds. Same thing with some of the plants, like the dandelions, the thistles. They're so deep down there that we spray it on top. It kills the leaves back, and we think we finished. But the perennial weeds will send more back up, more weeds back up. And then we have synthetic weed killers, and the active ingredient there is glyphosate, and you can see that in a variety of products. They are glyphosate. What it is absorbed by the leaves. So remember, the organic burns the leaves, and the leaves die, but some of these will send new weeds back up. A synthetic weed killer is absorbed by the weeds, and it sends the glyphosate throughout the plant and affects the roots, and affects the body of the plant, and affects all aspects of it. So going back to our pyramid, which is what this whole thing is based on, it's a culture of approaching weeds, much like it's a culture of approaching insects where this came from. And that is the first idea is to prevent weeds in the first place. What are the practices that we have? Getting out into the yard and seeing the weeds when they first show up, digging up with a special weed tool or getting in there with our trowel, whatever we need to do. The first thing is to get that weed pulled up. If you go to Texas, if you type in your browser Texas A&M weeds, they have an absolutely incredible page where they tell you whether or not it's going to be a broadleaf or a nutsedge or a grassy weed. If it's going to be something like a dandelion or a thistle, you're going to need to dig down. You may have to dig a hole around that weed that goes down a few inches, and you gently pull on it until you can feel it loosen up. And when you feel the whole thing come out, you see all the roots. Now you've got something, pack it back over. And the same thing with nutsedge. You get your trowel or you get your shovel, and you just start loosening. What I have found is if I can loosen the patch of nutsedge, because they tend to grow like that, if I can loosen it deep enough, then I can start pulling them out. And as one pulls out, the others pull out with it. But the idea is you're not going to prevent them if you're not out in your garden every day, every other day, seeing what you're doing. I think as Dr. Sam Cotner has said, that your shadow is your best friend in your garden. Uh, so the best first thing is going to be prevention. And then adding mulch to flower beds helps to stop the weeds. What weeds need are some sort of soil, which can be mulch, and then some sort of watering, which we water with our hose and with our sprinklers, and it needs sunlight. When weeds get set in our, as I mentioned earlier, in our clay soil, we can pull them out, but the roots are still firmly embedded in that clay soil. When the roots of weeds get into mulch, that mulch is not as settled and the weeds come out a lot easier. So we can mulch our beds, but when we mulch our beds, the idea is to keep the mulch away from the stem of the plant, because when the mulch is up against the stem, sometimes it encourages insects. So we keep the mulch slightly, maybe 2 inches away from the stem of the plant. But the mulch will help prevent weeds from coming up. Also, mechanical, as I said, is pulling it, and then chemical is, if you want to use chemical, the best thing to do is to go to the store with your weed and tell them, this is what I have. What do you have that will help stop this weed? But more than that, when do I apply it? Sometimes the weed killer needs to be applied in the morning. Some of these things need to be applied different times of day. Some of them need to be watered when you put them in. So when you ask, what do you have? How do I use it? And when do I use it? So that's what I have for now. Let me see if there are any questions. And let me stop sharing here for a minute.
Bill,
Well,
the
wait a minute.
question. The
Yeah.
questions that have been asked, Bill, you've already answered that with your lecture, so we don't have any new questions just yet.
All right, here's the website I have for you. It's AggieTurf, tmu.edu /turf grass weeds. And they will tell you if you, they have incredible pictures on there. You touch on the picture and it'll tell you exactly what kind of weed it is, how to eradicate it to an extent. The big one for us is this annual bluegrass. Some people call it Poa annua, and it comes in short and green, and it's really kind of attractive because if as you just walk around your yard, you think, well, my grass is beautiful green. It's that annual bluegrass. Now, what that annual bluegrass does is it chokes out the other grass and it spreads seeds real easily. And they're hard to miss because if you're not out in your turf grass, you just miss it. The way you see the effect of annual bluegrass or Poa annua is in March and April, the weeds will start to burn away, and you're going to find a lot of brown in your air in your grass. That's when, and you thought, well, I have actually beautiful green lawn. What you had was actually beautiful green weeds, but it's so short it looks like turf grass. So when it burns away, then you're left with these big brown spots, and you think, what did I do that killed my turf grass? Well, you didn't do anything that killed your turf grass. You had Poa annua growing there, and now that it's died, you see what your turf grass really looks like. Um, I covered this again. The pre-emergence work primarily on grassy weeds, not so much on broadleaf and not so much on nut sedge. The post-emergence, as I covered this, the synthetic no the organics are contact weed killers, which means it will kill the part that it actually comes in contact with. And so I know organic is important for some people. They're concerned about the systemic weed killers, and there's news about it all the time. And I know that people get concerned about using synthetic weed killers, but organic weed killers are acidic based and they will kill whatever you want, whatever's around there. So it's not a matter of spraying just on one particular area. But what you can do, which Skip Richter talks about in controlling weeds, is if you want to get really particular, you can get some of your organic weed killer and carefully wipe it on the blades of the plants, which may seem like it's a little obsessive, but if you have a beautiful flower garden with some absolutely beautiful perennials and annuals, then yes, you can get a little paintbrush or the little spongy things, and you can kind of dip it into your organic and wipe it on there. It will burn the leaf, but that is not going to really work on the perennial weeds because the roots are so deep that they'll simply another weed will come back up. You can take care of weeds and flower beds mechanically if you have a trowel that you very carefully run right beside the weed all the way down and break apart the soil. The annuals and perennials around it will usually be able to absorb the soil disruption, but to loosen up and then gently pull out those perennial weeds and the nut sedge. That's probably the best way to handle that. This is the picture of the contact, and it's systemic. And so here again, you see the contact, all the leaves that it touches, those will burn. The systemic works down into the roots, and it will kill the weed more efficiently. But again, the systemic, it will if it gets onto other things, it will kill them also. The systemic comes, as I mentioned earlier, in a couple different varieties. One is a systemic that is targeted for sedge killers, for sedge plants, will only kill sedges. It has to do with their reproductive system, their vascular system. The broadleaf killers will not kill the sedges because of the way the broadleaf killers work. So that's why I keep saying time and time again, take the weed to the nursery and show them what you have and see what it works. In Bexar County, here are some of the weeds we're going to run across. The dandelion is everybody's favorite. The bottom right is the thistle. In here we have purslane, and I'm not sure the henbit and the spurge. These are broadleaf. So if you see these growing, these will respond to broadleaf weed killers. These will not respond to sedges. These will not respond to grassy weed killers so much. This is the nut sedge. We have two of them here primarily. We have yellow and we have purple, and they can grow almost any place. And so what happens is we pull this stuff here off the ground and we think we've got it, but the nut, which is creating the problem, continues to be in underneath the surface. And this is a Poa annua. Again, it's a beautiful green, and it is an annual bluegrass in some place that works very well. But the seeds are the little white things that you see right in here and right in here and right in here. And when those things start going to seed, that's when that Poa annua just spreads all over the place. My yard had that pretty badly, and I just really just killed it all. I used the full glyphosate weed killer. I weeded the thing to the ground, dug up as much as I could, and had to start all over because this had spread so quickly and so prolifically that I just did not have a chance to get out there and stop it. By the time I realized what happened, it was too late. All right. So back to the questions.
We do have some questions now.
All right.
So, first question. We have someone who lives in Orange County. She says, we have an evil grass called torpedo grass and it's taking over the flower beds. It spreads by rhizomes. She said it can go 4 feet underground, even under landscape barriers. So, is there a way to eradicate that type of weed?
Torpedo is called torpedo grass.
Torpedo grass, and she said it can spread 4 to 5 feet underground. It's brought in with soils that they bring in, and apparently it's quite
Oh,
invasive.
yeah. You know, there's a yeah, the answer is yes. One is if the soil is manageable and you have a lot of free time, you get your shovel out there and you just start digging it up. I don't mind doing that, but I'm retired, so I can pull weeds for a fun afternoon. Otherwise, you if you know it's torpedo grass, you take it to the horticulture agent in that county, or you take it to the nursery in that county and you say, I have this stuff. How in the world do I take care of it? And it sounds like it's very similar to nut sedge. And there are nut sedge is herbicides. I think they're called sedge kill or something on that line. And there may be something similar for that product, but that's where you contact the local agent because I'm not familiar with that. We don't have that so much here.
All right. From one of our master gardener friends, how long do stored herbicides typically last?
Oh, that's a great question. I really don't know, and the reason I don't know is because I don't use it. So I haven't looked at I don't know the last time I bought an herbicide. That'd be something that you could look online or see if there's an expiration date on the package. That is a great question. I don't know if the synthetic herbicides have a rate at which they decline in their effectiveness. Man, that is a good question. I don't know.
Okay. Something we need to research a little. This individual says they have a small vine or weed growing in the flower bed and it tends to wrap itself around the flower stems. I know I have some of that too. Um, any suggestion on that again, where you have a vine or a weed that wraps itself around stems and other stuff, other plants that you
I
like to
have
get?
that. It's a wildflower or it's a wild vine. It's a broadleaf. And so spraying it just really with something like with a glufosinate product is just not practical because it's wrapped around plants that we want. What I have done is I have traced it the best I can back to its origin in the soil, and I pulled it, and then it'll die on its own. I really can't do much about the aesthetics of it, but I do have those, And there's another one that pops up from the ground that has little thorns on it, and that thing has a incredible taproot on it. And I have found that sometimes even the glyphosate product doesn't work. Sometimes glyphosate on some of these things, you have to spray them 2 and 3 times before it really gets to them because the roots are so deep. So on the
Yes.
things like that vine or the other one that has a little prickles or thorns on it, it's just a matter of tracing it back to the root where it goes into the ground and pulling it out. If you want to unwind it, that's up to you. But to me, it has to be mechanically removed simply because it's so intertwined with the plants that we want that if it's wrapped in with your marigolds, well, marigolds are broadleaf plants. So you spray a broadleaf weed killer, it's going to kill everything there is. Um, so that's the only answer there. And I usually find mine too late because they're green and they grow among the green things. You think, gee, that's a pretty green right there. And you don't look at it and realize that half of it's this little vine that's growing in there.
Yeah, and that's with glyphosate, as you've said so many times, glyphosate is indiscriminate and will just kill everything around it. So I think the plant you may be talking about the with the pricklies is might be the greenbrier. I have a ton of that, and yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a bugger to try to get down to the root and pull out, and it
Well,
comes back if you don't.
even the glyphosate products, those are not a one-time does it all. There's this I designed this labyrinth and had grass growing in it, and one of the landscape people put some glyphosate in there, and next year, the following year, there are weeds growing back. So it's not you can't count on it to absolutely take care of your problems. That's why the more you're in your garden, the more you catch those things at the beginning really is the best way to handle that. Okay, so
Agreed. All right. This another of our master gardeners has been treating thistles on the in their farm field by they cut the stalk before it goes to seed. Then they use a little bit of just regular table salt on the sodium chloride on the exposed root. And she wants to know, is there any downside to that strategy?
the down the downside, generally speaking, is adding salt because salt absorbs water. It's no, so I'm gonna speak theoretically and not specifically. A challenge with synthetic fertilizers. I know we're talking about a different topic, but synthetic fertilizers have salts in them, and the salt absorbs water. And so when too much fertilizer is put on, it absorbs water away from the plants. And so my point is, salts uh, can drain water away from other desired plants. So in that specific example, if it's a farmland and it's just open pasture, it may not be that big a deal. Uh, and it is an organic approach, but organic does not always mean it's the safest thing. But in that particular area, it might be work just fine. I'm not sure what the salt does. What we're trying to do is kill the top of the plant. Uh, but my understanding of perennial weeds and things like nut sedges is that, and apparently that torpedo grass is these perennial weeds is that we're only catching the top of it and we're not getting down where it's going to continue to send up plants, send up weeds. So that's why sometimes the glyphosate products will work, or you just have to dig down in there and pull them out. But if it's a farm field, that sounds like it'd be quite a project.
I would think so, yes. Good question on solarization. How long do you recommend keeping the clear plastic on? And is there a best time of year to do it, like when it's super hot?
You want it when it's hot. In January is really kind of useless. This time of year would be okay. And the way you do it is you pick out the section of grass that you want to solarize. Again, use clear plastic. As I was doing research, I showed some of the black plastic, but over they tell you want clear plastic because you want that sun going through the plastic. So let's say you have an 8 by 10 area you want to solarize. You water it because you need that moisture in there because it's going to help with the killing process. Then you put your tarp on top, and then you can use those garden stakes to stake it down, or you can put rocks on it. Somehow you need to keep that plastic on the ground. And when that sun comes through that clear plastic and hits that soil and that moisture in that soil, it creates an environment where it kills the weed seeds. As I said earlier, though, it's also going to kill the good stuff, the microbes that we want growing there. But those will rebuild when the weed seeds are gone completely. You can put some hopefully clean compost on it, and that'll help get some of those organisms back into the soil, and you can start all over again.
Okay. Is there any way to identify that poa grass or the annual bluegrass if it's in a lawn in turf grass?
Yeah, let me get to that slide for those of you who get headaches. Sorry
Yeah,
about
that
that.
that picture was helpful, I thought, because
This
it
is
showed
it
when it would
right.
just.
Yeah, this is it right there. And that's the best I can show you. It is a very thin grass, and you don't really see it until if you're just walking by until you see the little white seed heads, and that's when you're in trouble because it's already gone to seed. The challenge is that it blends in with our turf grass. If my St. Augustine is usually about 4 inches tall and it blends right in. So it will grow even if you have good healthy St. Augustine. But the yards right now are suffering because the rain has not been that great and the sun is beating them. And so they're just starting to dry up. And so those our grass is more susceptible. And when these weeds start coming in, and the seeds are already there in the soil, they sort of blend in what grass we have, and we don't see it until it's almost too late. And that's why I looked at my lawn this year, and I thought I don't have enough time to dig all of that up, so I just started over and actually shrunk the area of turf grass. So that's the best I can tell you on that. If it's an issue, my suggestion is you become a annual bluegrass specialist or a POA annua specialist, and you go to the Aggie website there on turfgrass weeds, and that's where you start. And you go to your browser and you type in POA annua colon TAMU, and you read everything you can about that because it's to me, it's one of the nastier weeds because you don't see it. Dandelions you see, thistles you see. These guys just sort of sneak in the grass and they sort of camouflage.
And you brought up something I did want to let our listeners know as well. If you go to our homepage, Bear County Master Gardener homepage, click on the gardening library. We have that resource in our gardening library, the Aggie Turf resource in the gardening library. So you can also access this directly through that route. What is this question from an attendee wants to know, what is the weed referred to as sticky weed? Not sure if they're talking about the one that like
Oh
reaches out and grabs
yeah,
your pants legs.
yeah,
The name is escaping me.
yeah. I can't think of it either. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That would have been a cute one to have up there. Interestingly enough, our ancestors used to use that for their mattress bedding.
Bed
Um,
straw. That's it.
yeah,
Bed straw.
Yeah, and that's one of those where, to me, you have to try to find the source of it, and you have to pull it, because some of these weeds, such as that one, it blends in with the grass as it grows, and you just don't see it. I mean, dandelions are so easy; they just stick up and say, "Here I am. I dare you to come take care of me." But those other things, they just kind of stick in there, and then you don't realize till you've walked into the house and you've got it all over the place, and your spouse starts yelling at you because you've tracked weeds into the house. But it's going to be a broadleaf weed, and it's just the nature of it growing. You just have to trace it back to its roots and pull it out.
All right. We have an individual, and you've described some of these situations, so I imagine this will answer several people's questions. In this case, they have zoysia grass invading a landscaped jasmine bed, and they want to know how can they get rid of the zoysia without harming the jasmine.
Um, wow, the zoysia grass will have to be, it's a mechanical kind of approach where you have to what I would do is I would get the shovel and I would have to cut where I want to keep that grass from growing into the jasmine. And that's where your shadow is your best friend, is you're out there constantly monitoring that. If that's the look you want, and I understand because it does look pretty, then part of the trade-off is for me to have that look, I need to constantly monitor that. And so it needs to be I would cut the physical barrier with a shovel. The weed eaters are nice because they're easy to cut, but they're also somewhat indiscriminate because our hands and arms don't always cover them, control them very well. So you get your hand clippers, and but that's just something you accept. If you want that beautiful zoysia look with that jasmine, that is that area where they come together is just going to be a challenge, and there's just not a whole lot you can do about it. It's just like people who have Bermuda grass and they want to have vegetable gardens. Those two things coexisting, that means I need to pay extra attention to how aggressive that Bermuda grass is going to be with that, because the empty soil, the Bermuda grass says it's a place for me to grow, and you just need to be very, very conscious of it. But that's a landscaping decision. If I want this look, this is what it's going to cost me in time and effort.
Okay. And our behind the scene horticulturist says that that sticky weed is called, the actual name is Gallium, Galium, for those of you wondering about that.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, Anna. All right. This person has both broadleaf weeds and grassy weeds. Can you use both kinds of herbicides at the same time for both those problems?
Uh, the, I'd say yes. Um, I would spray one. I don't know if I spray them both at the same time. I spray one and let it sort of die away and then spray the other. Uh, I don't think I'd do them both at the same time because I maybe it's just because I'm a little bit more obsessive. I'd want to do the one, then I'd want to do the other, rather than having two guns out there shooting the things all over the place. That's just me. But yes, decide which one you want to get rid of first, and use that particular product. And again, the pre-emergence will work on the grassy weeds. So you could, if it's a continuing problem, take that grassy weed to the nursery and say, I have this. Do you have a pre-emergent that will stop in the first place? And that will kind of help in future battles with it.
Okay. One of our master gardeners mentions that what East Texas described as a torpedo grass, we have a similar problem with Johnson grass in this area in terms of it just having to get down there and dig it out by hand. So that's a similar thing that we have here. All right. Someone else has honeybees and they want to know, oh, good question. I imagine other people have this question. Do you have any recommendations for pollinator friendly weed killers?
Okay, the last part again, I lost that. Friendly
They want to
pollen.
know if what are weed killers that are more pollinator friendly, because we know some of the herbicides and such are neonicotinoids that may be
Yeah,
harmful to bees. So can you recommend any that are not harmful to pollinators?
off top of my head, no, I don't know. That's where if you have a weed that you want to take care of, and they recommend a product, you can read on there what other effects there are with insects. But what Molly Keck will often say is if you're going to spray, she's talking about for insects, but avoid the time the pollinators are there. Some pollinators are more in the morning, so you don't spray in the morning. Some pollinators are more in the afternoon, so you don't spray in the afternoon. And so perhaps the best approach would be to spray when they're not there. But whatever product that you're going to use, do some research on it and find out its residual effects and its on pollinators.
And if you will send that email in to us, we can provide you some additional options after we do a little bit more research. I know I use some organic options that are spot treatments that have limited effect to that. So you can always email us at cultivate@bearmg.org. Would you talk just a little bit about the benefits of aeration and composting in terms of soil health and weed control?
Aeration is the process where holes are punched into a lawn. Um, it's not the shoes with little spikes on them. That's simply shoes with spikes on them. Aeration is usually a machine. there is a handheld device where you puncture a maybe a 2 or 3 inch hole into the lawn, and what it does, it breaks up our clay soil. And then on top of that, you can put a dressing of compost, which gets the compost down into the soil, which helps to break it up. And what that does is it improves the ability of water to filtrate through our clay soil, and it also allows the roots to grow more deeply because you're breaking up that clay soil. The thicker the turf grass, the less likely you're going to have weeds. My turf grass, except for the last couple of years, I got away from it. I don't use herbicides because my St. Augustine, which is the cheap Raleigh St. Augustine, I don't use the fancy stuff, is so thick that weeds, except for the last couple of years, have not been an issue. It is so thick that it just smothers the weeds. I don't have dandelions, thistles. I did have poa annua because the grass kind of died away in a couple of areas, and that's what caught it. Caught me a little bit. But the healthier you can make your turf, and St. Augustine, you want to mow it high so it'll shade out weeds. Zoysia and Bermuda, you want to cut it low to develop those thick roots, and that will help suffocate the weeds.
Okay. I am going to combine two questions here because they're a little bit similar. This person has an entire yard that they said is basically weeds just from lack of care. And so the two questions here kind of, would solarization be the best way to clear it out? Can you use that in a large area, even if nutsedge is present? And I'll ask the second part of that question when you answer that.
Yes, there's two ways. One is you can just spray it all and just till it all up. Or yes, you can solarize it. Depending on the size of your yard, you might have to do it section at a time. You'll need to leave it on for maybe. I didn't even get to that earlier. It needs to be on from 4 to 8 weeks. Some people say 4 to 6 weeks. So that could affect, the practicality of solarizing. But yes, solarizing it would be an excellent way to do it. It's less toxic than spraying something. And when we spray
Yes.
something on the lawn, if it's blowing, it could easily blow into some of our ornamentals. And some ornamentals are very, very sensitive to weed killers. So solarizing is a great option that is less toxic to your environment. Yes.
Okay. Second part of that question is they were wanting a recommendation on what grass should I replace it with and what time of year. Do they use seeds? I don't know where they live. They didn't state where they live, so that's kind of a broad question. You want to just throw out a broad answer?
Yeah, the process is once you've solarized each area, would be to put some compost down to break up the soil. If there is any shade whatsoever, you're going to have to use St. Augustine because Bermuda and Zoysia do not like to grow in shade. If it's full sun, Bermuda and Zoysia would be your best bets. If there are any beds around there, annual beds, perennial beds, vegetable beds, you'll probably want to go with Zoysia because Bermuda is very aggressive. So if there's shade, it's St. Augustine. If it's sun, it's Bermuda and Zoysia. If there are beds you care a lot about, you'll have to go more Zoysia because Bermuda will take over absolutely everything.
Yes, it does. All right. Can herbicides be used in wildflower areas?
Um, no, I'm gonna say no. Um, Sedge killers, yes, because the wildflowers are going to be broadleaves for the most part. So a sedge killer type thing, maybe a grassy weed, but in wildflower areas, that's a challenge because I have a wildflower area that's placed. I'm the garden steward, and I'm waiting for the wildflowers to die, and they're going to go to seed, and that's where I'm going to go in. I'm going to physically remove the weeds. That's how I have to do it. There is some concern about sprays and the effect it has on seeds. Going back real quickly to the seeding, if you want to seed, there is no St. Augustine seed. There is a Bermuda seed. There is a Zoysia seed, but you need to check with Aggie Turf about that. It's done in March, and it takes a significant amount of water to get that seed going. Just backing up a step.
Okay. Guys, it is. We just have a few seconds left till 10, so we are at top of the hour. If you think of a question after we didn't get to your question, please email us at cultivate@bearmg.org and we'll be glad to tackle any additional questions. Bill, thank you for the wealth of information
Well,
you have
thank you.
shared with us. Oh, great info as always. And with that, that concludes our first session, and our next workshop will begin at 10:30, and we hope to see everybody then. So see you all in about 30 minutes.
Thank you.